Hi. I've come here today to speak about the intersection of sustainability and storytelling. As many of you know, we are currently both causing and experiencing the sixth mass extinction event in Earth's 5 billion year history. And despite our awareness, we seem incapable of addressing the matter in a serious way. And the question I keep asking is why? There's a quote that I feel captures our current global situation well. Gus Speth, an environmental advocate, said, "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that." I thought it was interesting that he equated the top environmental problems with three human behaviors: selfishness, greed, and apathy. Many people believe that these traits are simply fundamental to human nature. But I have come to understand that these traits are not fundamental to human nature, but instead are a product of a story that we tell ourselves. Human beings are a storytelling species. It's what sets us apart from most other animals. We tell stories to coordinate our behavior, and stories serve as the backdrop from which all our behaviors arise. Another way to say it is that if you want to understand any human behavior, you need to make the attempt to understand their story. So what is the story that we tell ourselves that gives rise to selfishness, greed, and apathy? I call it the story of separation. This story says that each of us are individual beings, completely separated from all other beings. All of us must compete against each other to reproduce and survive in a hostile world of scarce resources that is trying to extinguish us at every turn. This story says that only by controlling and dominating this external world, bending it to meet our will, can we ensure our survival. If this is the story that we believe, then selfishness, greed, and apathy towards anything that doesn't help me to ensure my own survival are actually perfectly rational behaviors. Now, a quick glance at human evolution shows us that not all human cultures believed in the story of separation. Many indigenous tribes believed a very different story that said we are all part of something greater than just ourselves, and that every one of our actions has an impact on everything else in the world. I call this story the story of interconnection. In many ways, climate change is a ringing endorsement of this story of interconnection, as it represents a manifestation of all the externalized impacts of our collective behavior. This is why some people will choose to deny climate change, no matter how much evidence is presented, because it is a direct challenge to their story of the world. Many people will fight to protect their story because without it, they would feel lost, and their behavior, much of which is attached to their notion of survival, wouldn't make sense anymore. So it becomes important to understand how our stories change. Many people, like Gus Speth, thought that if you just gave people the correct facts and figures, that it would naturally lead to positive behavior change. But we've seen this line of thinking to be faulty. Our stories don't change that way. So how do they change? Our stories have an opportunity to change when we have experiences that our previous story can't explain. Imagine if the only experience you've had in this world is of people behaving selfishly and greedy. Then you find yourself in a situation where you are in need of assistance. Maybe your car ran out of gas and your cell phone had no signal. Then someone stops and goes out of their way to drive you to a gas station and back to your car. That experience would directly challenge your previous story that humans were greedy and self-interested. You may be able to write off a single experience as an anomaly, but the more experiences you have that show the generosity of people, the more impossible it becomes to believe your old story, and a new story has a chance to emerge. So what is your story? What is the story of your company? What is the story you tell your customers? When the sole reason for our companies to exist is to make a profit, we reinforce the story of separation in each person's life. But when we communicate about all the ways that our companies positively affect the environment and our communities, we help people to realize that both as individuals and as companies, our choices do matter. We can begin to see our new purpose, which is not solely to ensure our own survival, but to engage in the web of life in such a way that all beings are able to thrive, which ironically helps to ensure our own survival. We're all in this together. As a society, I believe we are transitioning from the age of me, where our actions have been aligned with maximizing our individual self-interest, to an age of we, where we realize that we can only be as healthy as the ecosystems we are a part of and the biosphere that sustains us. Now, I'm going to propose a kind of radical idea here, but imagine if every company decided to change the story around their purpose by attempting to solve a local environmental or social problem. Maybe Prada could make sure that no one goes hungry in a particular city, and Armani could ensure that no one goes without shelter. Perhaps Nike could invest in cleaning polluted water, and Patagonia could invest in reforestation. Actions like these have the power to create the kind of experiences that can change people's story of human nature. We are not, in fact, greedy, selfish, or apathetic by design. Today, in the digital landscape, we have the opportunity to tell new stories that are in alignment with this new age of we. As sustainability practitioners, it is our job to tell these new stories to align the values of interconnection with our business practices. When all stakeholders in a company fully understand and are committed to the new story, where everything connects to everything else, it creates a positive feedback loop within the organization that gives people a sense of real meaning and purpose, that their work is part of something much bigger than themselves or their company, which can have untold positive effects on morale and productivity. Imagine how your motivation changes if you're not only doing something to sustain your own livelihood, but you're doing something that helps society become more sustainable too. As a storytelling consultant, I believe that by focusing on the story of social good your company creates, you can offer an experience that is aligned with what people care about and help change their story about your brand. I invite you to connect with us, to begin developing your own ways to explore storytelling around the mission of your brand. Thank you very much.